This is a 2007 Porsche 911 Turbo. I've borrowed it from my friends at Exclusive Automotive Group, the Bentley and Aston Martin dealer here in the Washington, D.C. area, where it's currently listed for sale for under $51,000. With that price in mind, you have to ask yourself, how is this, the 997 911 Turbo, not one of the best bargains in the entire sports car market? I really mean that. I really think this is one of today's great sports car bargains, and in this video I'm going to explain why. And if you click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer, I've listed a few other cars I consider to be great modern sports car bargains, and I've also given more of my thoughts on the 997 Turbo. I'll start back here. Now, like I said, this isn't just a regular 911, but rather a 911 Turbo, which means that back here is a 3.6-liter twin turbocharged flat six that makes 480 horsepower and 457 pound-feet of torque. That thing can send this car from 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds and a top speed of 193 miles an hour, which will hang with exotic cars of today, let alone back in 2007. And this thing is less than $51,000. That's cheaper than an Acura RLX. The rest of the car is pretty cool too. Now obviously every Porsche 911 is a beautiful car, but the 911 Turbo is extra beautiful, especially with its special little 911 Turbo details that a regular Porsche 911 doesn't have. Like, for example, its special front bumper with the cool fog lights on either sides, and these big air intakes behind the doors, and its fixed rear wing. This car is also a little bit wider than a regular 911, but it's not so showy that it grabs as much attention as a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. It's really the perfect look, and this one is available for under $51,000. That's barely more expensive than a base model BMW 340i. Now, at this point, I already know what you're thinking, and that is, yeah, sure, I already know it's cool, but you're talking about a 10-year-old European performance car. Isn't this thing gonna blow up every time I drive it? Not exactly. From 2007 to 2010, Porsche used its famous Metzger engine block in the 997 Turbo. Now, if you go on the Porsche forums, you will find thread after thread after thread of people singing this engine's praises as if it was one of their children and had just finished a dance recital. Normally, this is the kind of obsessive devotion that people hate about internet car forums, but in this case, it's a good thing because this engine is famously solid and famously durable. You might have a few little problems with this car here or there, but you probably won't suffer any catastrophic failures. And this thing costs less than $51,000. That's cheaper than a rural Subway restaurant franchise. But it's confession time. This car is $51,000 because it has higher mileage and an unusual color combination, namely it's dark green. But the average asking price for a 997 Turbo with that Metzger engine is actually around $65,000 to $70,000 on AutoTrader, which is of course a lot more. And yet, even for that money, I still think it's a bargain. Part of the reason is the design. I recently made a video where I talked about how much I love this model's predecessor, the 996 generation 911, but that car's styling is so much more controversial. This one is more traditionally Porsche and more traditionally handsome. Same goes for the interior. While the 996 model's interior has been criticized as cheap and outdated, something I don't really agree with, the 997's cabin is undoubtedly sharper and more attractive. Yes, it's starting to look old, but not quite as married to one time period as the 996. By virtue of being less daring, it looks like the 997's interior is aging better. Another one of the things that makes this car great is that it's very much quintessentially Porsche in every respect. The best example of this will always be the cup holders. Right now, no cup holders. Press this cover and they're revealed, but hidden. So you push on them and they pop out and you can adjust them to the size of your drink. But that's not the cool part. Check this out. You can then push the cover closed, hiding the cup holders again. You want the other cup holder? Open the cover, get it out, and then you can close the cover again. Way too much thought went into this. It's so German, so Porsche, and so brilliant. And this attention to detail, smart engineering, and intuitive practicality is everywhere on this car. For instance, want to change the temperature? Pretty simple. And it's also simple to change where in the interior the air comes out. The door locks aren't hidden or tricky, they're just there. They work. Same goes for the hazard lights. On the door, you have a door handle and a window switch. No stupid gimmicks. The mirror control is right where you'd expect it to be, by the mirrors, and it works exactly as you'd think it would. There are no gimmicks with the turn signal lever.
It's a turn signal lever. Same goes with the lever for the windshield wipers on the other side of the steering wheel, with a little dial for intermittent wiper speed. Even setting the clock on this car is simple. There's a little switch with a clock on it coming out of the gauges. Push it in for a second, then twist to change the time. The glove box works like a normal glove box, and it's bigger than you'd think for a car like the 997 Turbo. The door panel may look like a normal door panel, but check this out. They engineered storage into the armrests. Of course they did. The center console opens like it does in a normal car, and Porsche even put little tiny slots in there for coins, which I'm sure German 911 drivers use religiously. The gauge cluster may not be as pretty as it is in a McLaren or a Ferrari, but it gets the job done. It shows your range, your air pressure per tire, your location, and more. In back, well, there is a back. Not many cars that do 0 to 60 in 3-point-something seconds have a back seat. Also, the front trunk is relatively roomy. There's more space in here than you'd expect. As for uniquely Porsche exterior details, you see that silver thing? That's the headlight washer. They'll paint it the car's exterior color if you pay extra. And my favorite bit, even though this is an exotic car with supercar performance, they still leave these things on top so you can easily mount roof racks.
So the 997 Turbo has excellent practicality, precisely as you'd expect from a Porsche. It also has attractive styling, excellent performance numbers, and reasonable pricing. I mean, under $51,000. That's cheaper than installing a racquetball court. It also has a quintessentially Porsche experience when you take it out on the road, as I shall now demonstrate. All right, driving the 997 Turbo. Now this one's Tiptronic. I've never driven a automatic 997 Turbo, except for one with PDK, Porsche's dual clutch system, which came out much later. Nonetheless, the moment you get inside this car, even with just the automatic, it still kind of feels like home. You know exactly where everything is, because everything is simple and logically laid out. I just drove the McLaren 570S, the video went up forever ago, but I just drove it, and there's all these cool buttons and everything's cool. There's all these weird gadgets and it's awesome, but like sometimes you just want to turn on the climate control, you know? You don't want to look around for a while. I actually think that there's an argument to be made that Tiptronic could be considered by some to be the better transmission for this car. Manual's more fun, you shift the gears, that's great, and I totally get that, and I personally believe that, but I imagine some would say, with Tip, you just stomp your foot down and this thing takes off, and it's actually kind of a thrill in just a completely different way than having a manual is. Every 911, early ones, current ones, it doesn't matter. They're all just point it, goes where you want. That's great, God. And then this one just takes off. There's no question it's not as fast as like Huracan, that 570S, NSX, all that crazy new stuff. But it isn't slow. It's not as fun with the automatic, there's no doubt, especially because this is one of the old torque converter automatics. It doesn't even have paddles, it has little thumb buttons. You can't even shift it down on the gear selector itself. It's just put it in manual mode, then you have to use the thumb buttons. The thing I like about the automatic is the 911s have always been more comfortable than the Ferraris and the Lamborghinis of the world, for better or worse. And if you really want that, you could just kind of relax and whatever in this car, and you still have this beautiful car with 500 horsepower at your disposal. And if you want to dispose of it, you may. Just stomp your foot down, you don't have to do any shifting, and you're gone. It's not as precise, it's not as flat, it's not as crazy as a modern 911 Turbo would be, or any really high-end modern exotic, but it's just such a blast. It's so exciting to drive. It's amazing that a rear engine car can feel so balanced and so perfect. I love that. Now we get into, I'm sort of in more traffic here, and no exotic car does this very well. Or I'm now kind of going slowly behind a bunch of cars. Most exotics feel like they want to go. Come on, what are you doing? Let's go, let's go. But the 911, if you want, you can just relax and it just drives like a normal car. Another thing, I'm going over like a low curb here. In an exotic, you know, that's something you always have to worry about. In a Porsche, you go over a low curb and it does it. If you scrape something or scratch something, it isn't $4 million because of some carbon fiber part they only made for a year and a half. And I love the subtle styling of this car. Some people want more, oh, look at me, but I'm over that. I really prefer people don't look at me, but I enjoy the car. And if car people want to talk to me, that's fine. But you know, you get an exotic car and you get so many wanted trades at the gas station and it's just tiresome. This car, you don't have to deal with any of that, but you still get sort of the performance of a real exotic car. This is also a car you don't really have to explain to people. I feel like this is one of those cars you can drive to the office if you own a business and you're worried about your employees thinking that you have too much money. It's just a Porsche, you know? Everybody's uncle's got a Porsche or whatever. And that's kind of a neat thing. But then you get on these back roads and this car just totally comes alive if you want it to. Without any changing suspension settings and blah, 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 you just bomb down these things and it is so ready for it. So this car is great. It's fast, it's fun to drive, it's beautiful, it has a lot of stuff, it's practical, and it's reliable. And I haven't even gotten to the best part. Yes, $51,000 is still a lot of money, and of course $65,000 to $70,000 is even more, but very few cars lose value as slowly as a Porsche 911 Turbo. Buy one of these today for $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, drive it for a few years, and you could probably sell it for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. Even if you have some pricey repairs, that's still less depreciation than a new Camry. Put it all together, and yes, I really do think this is one of the great sports car bargains today, and it'll even hang with some modern exotics.
And with all that in mind, now it's time for the Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and specifically styling, the 997 Turbo is gorgeous, but it doesn't have the exotic look of some of the top supercars, so it earns a 7 out of 10. Acceleration does 0 to 60 in 3.6 seconds, giving it an 8 out of 10. Handling is sharp, but not quite as precise or connected as modern exotic cars or the new 911 Turbo. It earns a 7 out of 10. As for cool factor, it's definitely cool, but most people wouldn't turn their heads to notice it, so it can't approach modern exotics. It gets another 7 out of 10. Finally, importance. It's a wonderful car, but not a historical or particularly significant one, so it earns a 6 out of 10. That places its weekend score right where you'd expect, 35 out of 50, a few points behind the Audi R8 and the Lexus LFA. Next up, the daily categories, starting with features. The 997 Turbo had a lot of equipment for its time, but it lags behind with today's most modern gadgets, as you can expect from a 10-year-old car, so it earns a 5 out of 10. As for luxury, which measures comfort and smoothness, it boasts a nice ride for a sports car, but not quite on the level of true luxury cars, so it gets a 6 out of 10. Quality measures reliability and materials. Reliability is reportedly excellent, and while materials appear nice, some are certainly geared more to function than attractive appearance. Still, it earns a strong 8 out of 10. Next up is practicality. The 997 Turbo's 4 cubic feet of trunk space should earn it a 2, but its useful back seats bump that up to a 3 out of 10. Finally, value. This car is a great bargain at $51,000, but many asking prices are above $70,000 where it loses some of its luster. It's still an excellent deal for its performance, quality, and design, and it gets a 9 out of 10. That brings its total daily score to 31 out of 50, the highest number yet tested, indicating that yes, you'd love to drive one of these every day, and I would. It also means the final Doug score is 66 out of 100, placing it just behind the Audi R8 and ahead of the Lexus LFA, which is sensible considering its combination of great performance and usability for a fairly reasonable price.